You there, Michael? First, welcome everyone to our BSMA Logistics Virtual Roundtable. As folks are joining here, just wanted to say a few words here. I want to welcome everyone to this roundtable for BSMA Logistics. Our speakers will address temperature management challenges and the impact of COVID-19 on capacity that's affecting the life sciences today. This Zoom event from Biosupply Management Alliance demonstrates yet again our global commitment to partnership with its members and colleagues desiring to better support our industry. We're ever mindful of all of those impacted by COVID-19 and now even more our commitment to patients' lives. My name is Joel Glendy, a longtime logistics professional and BSMA facilitator. And so glad that you are here today. I can be your host and moderator for this panel and being among industry experts today. Our agenda really is very simple and should be very interactive. Each panelist will spend 5 to 10 minutes on their key topic area. It's allowing adequate time for our audience to submit questions only via the chat tool. As this is a roundtable, we'll encourage interaction discussion between the speakers as we go along in a less rushed type of approach today. And during the discussions, I only ask 3 things. First, be thinking of questions during our discussions. Then submit your questions via the chat tool, and consider future participation, whether you're in manufacturing, as a shipper, as we're going to say shipper, or as a service provider. We embrace new talent in BSMA. We're going to either address all of your questions during this broadcast or by other means after our event, which is being recorded. Lastly, we'll wrap up with any summary comments as time permits. But as an icebreaker in introducing our panelist execs, starting it was around March 18th. You see this was in the Wall Street Journal, actual quote: "Everywhere you look, the global supply chain is a mess." Then the Suez Canal was blocked for a week. After you introduce yourself and your company, could you, each of you, just spend a minute describing the state of the supply chain from your specific vantage point? First, Douglas Porter from Illumina. Doug?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Porter. I'm the Associate Director of Global Transportation for Illumina, the world leader in genome sequencing equipment. And so to answer your question as far as what the world looked like on March 18th, obviously with us having our manufacturing facilities scattered around the world and the world shutting down, we received a huge shock to our system and our ability to service our customers from March 11th onward, and really have been working, very diligently to try to come up with creative solutions to try to address the capacity constraints that we're seeing within the market as a whole, and that continues to this day.
Thanks, Doug. Andrew Boyle of Boyle Transportation. Andrew?
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to participate in this group and really to serve this clientele. So we're a ground transportation provider, so validated, secure temp control. So our clients include biotechs, mature pharma companies, medical device makers, and then healthcare distributors. and we operate primarily in the U.S. and cross-border in and out of Canada. So this is an extraordinary time, uncomfortable, and we and many of our peers, I think one or two may be on the line, are just experiencing an extraordinary capacity crunch with extraordinarily high demand. So you would think that's like a great position to be in. It's not. It's not fun. It's not fun saying no to people. We have to turn down about 50% of the business offered to us each week. So unfortunately, it's not like software where you just, there's incremental growth based on the same, marginal cost. And we have a massive shortage of professional truck drivers. So as you guys might know, the labor market is extraordinarily tight and the pool is very shallow. And that plays out across many industry sectors. One factor clearly is the extended federal unemployment kicker, right? So people kind of in the medium to kind of lower to middle income jobs are somewhat disincentivized to return to work. And then, for 80% of stuff in the US moves on trucks. Jeff Tucker knows that, right? And so several factors deliver that kind of result. So more drug and alcohol testing, which is a very good dynamic, and several other factors have led to about 40 to 50,000 truck drivers being sucked out of the pool. And I would hire hundreds of people tomorrow. We're trying. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying, but that's the biggest factor in capacity tightening. And then furthermore, just the expectations that historically people have had associated with ordering useless junk on whatever website and having it delivered within 24 hours have kind of distorted their expectations. And that's played out across multiple modes. And we can get into that further, but certainly a lot more planning goes into the simple logistics that may have been assumed in the past, particularly with all the supply chain shocks.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Andrew. Jeff Tucker with Tucker Company Worldwide. Jeff?
Thanks, Joel. And great lead in, Andrew. Great to be here again. Tucker Company is the oldest privately held freight brokerage in the country. So the only trucks in 60 years that we've owned are my SUV and this little doozy right here on my printer. So we arrange transportation. We started in heavy haul, overdimensional project cargo. So some of the biggest, widest, heaviest, longest shipments, and then kind of morphed into some other difficult freight, such as life science freight and some other high value, maybe non-life science products. So we're pretty unique in the brokerage space, trying not to deal with the raw materials, and commodities, that sort of thing. So I think that I'll step back because Andrew, I think, did a nice job doing the trucker side of things. I'll just say that when you have all the ships moored off the coast of California and other ports, just think about what happens. Typically, those ships get unloaded. A lot of those containers maybe go to the region, right? But a lot of those containers are also put onto the rail, or the contents of those containers are put onto rail and distributed elsewhere around the country. With the supply chain struggles that we've had globally, products get a little bit more urgent, right? So they've been sitting off the coast for a lot longer than you thought. And all of a sudden they need to be expedited. So train speeds have been slowed. Right? The ports are jammed. Train speeds are slowed. The urgency of that product becomes, heightened, and then trucks get sucked into to take some of the burden off of the railroads, right? So you've got this. In addition to, I think the number just came out. I think the last quarter grew at about over a 6%, GDP pace. Anything, in my experience over 30 years in the business, anything over that 2.5–3% GDP pace is a strain on our marketplace. You know, with what's happening today, everywhere you look, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, it's just a compound. So, you know, back in 2014, we had a polar vortex, and that created a ripple effect that lasted, that impacted the trucking and the rail industry for 6 months. We've got a whopper on our hands right now, and I think we're all just kind of really struggling to figure it out. But that is the best thing about this industry, is that you know, there's something new every day for us, and you know, while the industry, the supply and demand, the equilibrium of our industry is you know, is delicate, the industry is also incredibly resilient. And, you know, I hope to have a chance to talk a little bit about that later.
Totally agree, Jeff. Thank you. Laurent Kovacs from DB Schenker. Laurent?
Morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very much excited to be back on the panel again and talk about where we left off and discuss the updates that happen in the world of international transportation and logistics. Again, I think, Jeff, it's the perfect storm. I'm not sure when we will reach the eye or get out of this storm, but contrasting or last conversation from last year, I think it's getting worse. So I'm glad to be here. I lead the vertical market healthcare in the region Americas for DB Schenker, where our commitment is to provide logistics execution with patient safety and well-being at the center, and ensuring product integrity using enhanced end-to-end visibility and standardized processes in our worldwide network. And there are a lot of things that we are passionate about at DB that really play well with the topics that we are going to discuss today, how the capacity and how the market, even though the Suez Canal is really far away from our home market here, at the same time, it did impact incredibly the world of air freight indirectly, which is an interesting ripple effect that I will be happy to talk about. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Gary Hutchinson of Modality Solutions. Gary?
Thanks, Joel. And everyone, thanks for showing up and giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I don't know if it was by plan or by accident, but I see I'm sandwiched between the carriers on one side and the packaging providers on the other. And that's really our role. Modality Solutions is an engineering firm focused almost exclusively on the biopharmaceutical cold chain. And we help our clients design, qualify, and validate their cold chain to get ready to file, and then for optimization post-filing as well. And I think the biggest thing we've seen after you've heard about all the supply chain disruptions from the carriers out there is how the manufacturers are reacting. And it's typically taking a look at planning on longer transit times, looking at different thermal packaging technologies. You know, SkyCell and VacuTech, who talk after me, are two very popular choices now, just because of the duration. And you know, our clients are beginning to understand that you know, passive shippers, either EPS or polyurethane, probably aren't going to provide the protection needed in a supply chain that's this fragile right now. So they're looking at different options. I think the other thing that's interesting, we spent a significant time on the back half of 2020 helping out with about, you know, from our best guess, about 40% of the emergency use authorizations for the COVID-19 vaccines and therapies that were out there. And there was a lot of questions, a lot of conversation about alternative modes of transportation. So we focus very heavily on truck and air and on ocean as well. But some of the things we've been asked for has been, you know, non-standard transportation. We got questions about vibration transports on military transport, all types of different type of equipment that's typically not within we'll say more of a traditional biopharmaceutical transportation network. And so you can just see as this vaccine distribution is rolled out, there's been significantly more questions on types of transportation, types of packaging, and what the potential impact could be on drug product quality and transportation.
Excellent, Gary. Thank you. Michael Haley with SkyCell. Mike?
Hey everybody, good afternoon, good morning. Michael Haley with SkyCell, based here in Kansas City, Missouri, Business Development Director. One thing I want to share that SkyCell has really had an impact from COVID is, there's a laundry list of things we could talk about. One thing I want to speak to that all of us will talk about, and that's capacity and how capacity has affected our industry. For us, operational excellence is always at the forefront. And this has to do with fleet management and fleet utilization. Keep in mind that passive shippers, the active shippers, all the pallet-sized shippers are all bidding for the same space on all freight modes. So all of our shippers, all of our manufacturers, and us still trying to move our fleet around the globe is all bidding for that limited capacity. And that's really put our operations team at a pivotal point to ensure that we can manage the fleet properly and ensure we have the volume that we need in particular places around the globe to fulfill the obligations, the expectations of our customers. So like the shippers, like the freight forwarders and such, we too feel the crunch on capacity, and we've really had to redesign, if you will, how we manage that to make sure that we're still there, we're still available, and we're still in the right places for our customers to utilize our products and make sure they're managing their products properly.
Thank you, Michael. Last and certainly not least, appreciate you being patient. Felix?
Thanks a lot, Joel. Thanks a lot. And the great thing about being the last is I don't have to repeat what was already said by everyone else. So I'll make that short. We're Vacutech. We're a leading provider or producer of vacuum panels and high quality packaging solutions, small to big. I can only second what has been said. Obviously, the supply chain looks different than it looked 14 months ago. We had to adjust there as well. We did, and I can confirm what Gary said. We do see a trend that customers have an interest in longer validation because of those hiccups. So we do see a trend towards longer validated qualified solutions. We also see a lot of volatility in orders, going up, going down, and that is obviously influenced by the supply chain. When capacity is available, you have to cramp in everything at the same time. That's definitely impacting our operations, and there I can only agree with what Michael said before. We had to sit down and think about how we plan availability, stock levels, and so on, in order to make sure that our customers do get the packaging solutions they need at the right time and the right location. And for sure, we moved a lot of that away from last minute repositioning in air freight, which we were able to do just 14, 15 months ago when those rates and capacities were still feasible for that, and had to increase stock levels and ramp up production in order to support the supply chains around the world. It's definitely challenging, but it's never boring, and I'm looking forward to this panel discussion and possibly find some collaborative ideas to move ahead.
Great, Felix. Appreciate it. And great, gentlemen. 7 perspectives on that lead-in little icebreaker, and we broke the ice. And yeah, not only wet ice but dry ice for those that know what I'm talking about. So check this topic out again. Temperature management challenges with COVID-19 and its impact on capacity. Seems real technical. We're going to try to stay technical, but keep it in perspective here. First, Laurent, let's look at the 35,000 foot level from the air industry perspective. What's going on with our temp control space with the reduction in passenger space, canceled flights domestically here, struggle to get air cargo out. You know the drill, right? How's it going and where are we headed?
Thanks, Joel. Only too well. I think when it comes to the question or answering your question, there is little change compared to where we left off. And just to recall where we were and where we are at for the audience here, there was a good development in the past 6 months when it comes to returning capacity in the market. Interestingly, however, that development is really thanks to the increased influx of capacity from freighter capacity and not from belly capacity. So the international flights that we all used to do, and I so would like to go back on those flights, are still not coming back to an extent that would be really visible and help with the demand in capacity. Now that has another aspect of concern that continues to be present in the supply chains, is that freighter capacity, although it's there and it's greater in its sum, because freighters have more space than typically a passenger aircraft.
I lost you, Laurent.
Got Joel confirming. I can't hear him either.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm not sure where you all lost my latest. What was the last thing you heard?
I think belly capacity.
Okay, all right.
Limited. Lost you again.
So just I'm back. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, technical issues. So, the belly capacity, just to wrap up, is that.
All right. So again, I'm having technical issues here. Apologies. So the belly capacity is not coming back in a way that we were expecting it to come back. So if I look at the numbers, the available belly capacity is still about 47-48% down, which is a large gap. So what it means for the temperature controlled transportation and distribution is simply longer wait times are still observed when, as Felix said, getting onto an aircraft is increasingly challenging and continues to be challenging. So there has to be some flexibility when we want to move the temperature controlled cargo from point A to point B. And I think, as Gary alluded to, and also as Felix mentioned, while shippers focus on validating and qualifying longer solutions, I think that is a very smart move, because with the belly capacity being absent still from the market, what I have seen recently is the increased use of airports that are traditionally not your usual international airports that passenger flights go to. They are the smaller, more remotely located international airports that can accommodate cargo capacity. Now, that has the effect that there is a larger gap between that airport going back to your regular supply chain. So you indeed will need a packaging solution that can withstand longer transit times and different types of exposure that happen normally during the hands-off in transportation. So overall, yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Laurent. Let's appreciate that. Let's move back to where we've said this before. It's getting to be almost a regular occurrence here, where the rubber meets the road. Let's get right at the surface transportation, as we call it. Jeff Tucker, certainly welcome. And trucking is at its all-time tightest market right now, from what you've been sharing in previous and offline here, but the demand for trucking exceeding supply by such a large margin. How with this happening, what is happening, and why do you think this is? And what do you think truckers or shippers can do? First of all, lastly, if you would give us a glimpse of how long we can expect this situation to be lasting.
So I'll do my best to answer that from my perspective. I think it's been 40 years of trucking deregulation, and really the first capacity crisis in trucking since deregulation was in 2003 to roughly 2005. That was, if you recall, was George Bush, W. Bush tax credit. Third quarter of 03, we were just sort of coming out of a recession, and boom, that just kind of catapulted the industry, the trucking. Then just a few months later, FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, changed the driver's hours of service and served to drive capacity out of the market by the hour change. But then, fast forward, you didn't have anything really of significance from that 2005 until about that, I mentioned the polar vortex of 2014. That took 6, 7, 8 months for the industry to normalize. Then you've had two more. You had one in 2018, which was devastating, and then you have this, where we are now. And if you look at a lot of the data that comes out, Morgan Stanley's got great data on demand of trucking and the different modes of trucking. We are exceeding what was previously the worst capacity crisis in our nation's history, and that was 2018. So if you take a look at, we're seeing, I mentioned equilibrium a little while ago. I believe the market of trucking works very similar to the market for, crypto and the stock market. It does not quite as visible, but it's alive and it's breathing, and it's a pretty amazing thing. So I think that, as Andrew mentioned earlier about us buying and there's and wanting the things the next day, it's placed an extra strain on transportation, right? But if you take a look a step removed from transportation, that's inventories. Inventories are becoming an exact science. Nobody wants any inventory. They want the through inventory, right? They want it to move through the warehouse as quickly as humanly possible, right? And that's the goal. So when you've got such a delicately balanced and such a heavy consumer-driven economy, transportation becomes that much more important. Also mention that we hear a lot about driver shortage, but in the last 8 years, right through to today, we've added nearly 1 million drivers, 1 million drivers to the for-hire driver pool. Now, Andrew mentioned the driver shortage, and if you're a large carrier of any size, you've got a massive driver shortage. But what is happening at the smaller size and even at the large size carriers, there are lots of tools, electronic tools. Truckstop.com has them. Companies like Landstar that utilize owner-operators, make it easy for drivers to be their own boss. And no matter how much money you spend, you can't necessarily fight. If you're a large carrier with a lot of assets and great equipment, you can't necessarily always fight the battle between a driver who wants to be his own boss, doesn't want to be told what his customers and what his wait times are going to be and that sort of thing. So there's that dynamic that is behind it. So last year, this time, we lost a tremendous number of drivers. Like literally, it was a bloodbath because there was no freight to move. Shippers who were still shipping during that time had to shuffle the deck a little bit. And one little thing in the marketplace ripples straight across. Shippers had to begin to find new alternatives and settle down. And all of a sudden, the summer came in 2020, and this is when that that crazy market that we're in really began. So drivers began, and the data proof was out, that drivers began coming back into the marketplace. The biggest trouble with this current market of drivers and the small owner operators is, for several years, we had the longest economic recovery in history. For several years, drivers could live in a spot market, basically finding loads on a board and moving and not really having a customer. I think that's pretty dangerous. I would never consider, it's like day trading almost. But I think that, back to your question, I think that's from my perspective and what I see as a freight brokerage. But the 2003 capacity crisis and the 2018 capacity crisis, that took somewhere in the neighborhood of a year and a half to kind of normalize. And I think that we're probably 6-8 months into what is likely to be another year and a half, to normalize. Just that's my guess.
Right.
Yeah. So I think one last thing. I think that shipper buying practices really need to change. Typically, they'll buy in a year, sometimes 2 years out, and the marketplace, as I mentioned, every 2 years is flipping in the last 6, and you just can't. You've got to have a little bit of brokerage, in there to help you. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility and to withstand these ebbs and flows. And that might be just, bidding, I don't know, every quarter, every 6 months, just your trouble lanes, the ones where your performance isn't darn near perfect, or and then that I think that's a way to stay a little closer to the market and where the market's moving.
Great, sir. Now, Andrew Boyle, you may still be muted, just to check. But first, thanks so much for joining in this roundtable. We'd really like to hear from you as having firsthand experience in moving vaccines. Help us understand some of the current dynamics out there in terms of both, fulfillment of demand and capacity challenges, and things specific to your company, and what you're seeing for trucking here in the horizon.
Sure. Well, certainly it's a great honor to participate in that effort, and just the Herculean task between drug developers, regulators, clinical trial participants, and then many of us logistics professionals. It's great that blue collar folks are being recognized for their role in that effort. Clearly all of my peers and friends here have articulated the capacity tightness in all modes globally. I try to look at it, okay, given that scenario, we're basically in an asset allocation business now, right? A scarce resource, where are you going to allocate those assets? And it has to be on a relationship basis, not on a transaction basis. So to Jeff's point, I would just encourage folks, even if you're not a higher volume shipper, you do want to engage logistics providers more on a relationship problem solving basis, because if you're a transaction, we quickly identify you as a transaction person or, organization, and then you're kind of marginalized, quite frankly, because then it's got to be done to mutual benefit and mutual convenience. And we do that for maybe 3 to 5% of our total business, because otherwise we're engaging in massive investment in rolling stock, equipment, technology, and most importantly, people to support a long-term mutually beneficial relationship. So your question earlier about how are we dealing with it, a huge part of our solution is investing in software. So yes, we are a logistics provider and a trucker, quite succinctly, but we are in the software business too. So we have a full software development team because our stuff is proprietary. There's so many different disparate tools and technologies, right? IoT stuff, and on vehicles, where, you're reporting a lot of information, including temperature and product integrity. So the reason we have a proprietary system and team to develop it is to just suck all that information in, because the biotech, you don't want all that data thrown at you. You want it wrapped in a package that is kind of elegant, simple, and digestible. Hey, this is helping my GDP compliance. this is all my record keeping, and for my peers and coworkers globally have access to that. That's what, from our perspective, based on feedback, that's what you want. You want it all wrapped and distilled so that it's kind of relevant to you. So here we are, we're in the software business too. So for those of us who have teenagers or 20-somethings, encourage them to take a couple coding classes, because boy, when you look at how open source softwares like platforms like Android became prevalent, we have a mobile app facing our blue collar workers who are on the scene. We have interface for the client, and then we have internal software with optimization and stuff. So boy, the demand for software developers has just grown exponentially. But that's kind of how we're trying to approach it to help solve the problems.
Yeah, a lot of telemetry, and then you have the proprietary aspect of it, and I didn't think of it in that aspect.
Yeah, and people don't want us to do the no-look dish and pass that on to them, to the client, right? They want us to distill it down and then furnish what's relevant.
Yes. Excellent.
Oh, Joel, can I interject a question? So from one of our audience, or not?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
I want to give the rest of the crew their first thing. We're almost there. Now on to our valued shippers, Douglas Porter. Thanks for joining us, first of all, Doug. And from your perspective, as a shipper, what are the temperature-sensitive product manufacturers asking for today in this climate? And how is this a bit different than in previous years? And anything else you'd like to share on this subject is certainly welcome.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. This is my first time attending the panel, so I really enjoying it thus far. I find it very, very useful. But as everyone else has said, obviously the capacity constraints have impacted as a manufacturer us greatly. And not only in our ability to service our customers, but obviously on the inbound side, just in extending our lead times and really the volatility of not having predictive supply chain that helps our manufacturing process and our inbound raw materials into our process. And as the owner of the cost of our supply chain, obviously I'm trying to drive down costs. So clearly costs have risen exponentially over the past year, and as you look for opportunities to reduce those costs and get your freight into the right mode, into the optimal mode for that freight, so that you are reducing your costs as much as possible on the ocean, on the ground, whatever the case may be. The volatility, the capacity issues are all headwinds against you being able to execute that as a shipper. And so that has really been something that we've struggled with over the past year or so, just trying to have some stability in the supply chain as dealing with the capacity constraints. I'd say on our customer side, what we see is I guess I'd call it the Amazoning of our supply chain, or rather of our customers' expectation of what that experience should be like. They expect a flawless execution every time, and the only way you're able to do that is through data and for information. And so, one of the things that we're trying to see is as Andrew was talking about, is getting that data, not only location data of where your shipment is, but also conditions to allow you to manage that a little bit better, to allow your supply chain team to respond to that data, and getting it in a format, and dealing with different carriers. Obviously, you have to have some platform that takes all of those different location signals from all of your different suppliers, bringing them into your system, so that your team can go ahead and utilize that data and respond to it appropriately. The other piece that we're seeing our customers demand is and no surprise, the greening of their desires to be more environmentally efficient, environmentally conscious. And so finding packaging solutions and looking at your overall carbon footprint and that type of stuff. So, you know, trying to find, you know, more returnable packaging, more packaging with made out of reusable materials and that type of stuff. It's really what our customers are looking for. And so we're always looking at different options in that to, you know, to green our supply chain, obviously at a cost-effective point also.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's often overlooked, but now being more mandated. And every time I was involved with those type of events, and this goes back to the 90s, it would come back saving companies money when they really looked at their total, you know, total cost of ownership. Thank you, Doug. Now on to packaging systems. First, Felix, welcome, of course, and appreciate your insight for sure in the air industry. What is the state of the technology in freight today, specific to temp management, and areas Vacutech is headed to in supporting our shippers' needs?
Thanks, Joe, and thanks to everyone already chiming in with very interesting and valuable information to kind of better understand the current situation. In terms of technology, I think our customers are mostly interested in having a solution that properly works. So most of our investment goes into a technology and improving that technology to make sure that the product that is transported in our solution is safe. But what we do see over the last year, that the digitalization trend that has already happened in a way, that has accelerated in many instances, and we had to also adapt to that to a certain degree. So not only has the work from home environment and the not being on site environment led to offering, let's say, digital order tools, but it also refers to digital training, digital validation. Yeah, so things where Gary is also supporting with his company. So from our end, we're investing time and resources also in making sure to support our customers on a digital way, with providing SOPs, with providing standards, with providing training, be it via Zoom call or be it with videos or something similar, just to help them operate in this environment where we're in currently. The other thing, and that's, I don't know if that's really a technology, it's more a question of following up on the comment that Andrew made, is we really drive when we get transparent information about what's planned, when and how. It just allows us to position the packaging, to produce the packaging, and to position the packaging and to prepare it properly for the use. We understand the volatility in the market, so we understand that that's not always something that is available firsthand, but it does allow us any open tripartite discussions that we have jointly with the shipper and the LSP, allows us to plan better and to be possibly a step ahead of the next supply chain surprise coming, and that allows us to serve better. And again, that's where we would engage with our partners on the logistics side, to make sure that the value that we can provide in planning is well received, and that we can support them and their clients on that end. So that's pretty much the focus for us. As said, on the technology side, we always want to make sure that our customers, and we said that, have ease of mind, peace of mind when it comes to packaging solutions, especially in the current state of the supply chain. So ensuring that these solutions work for the desired time is, I think, a challenge that all packaging providers have to provide back to their partners as well as the clients, in order to support in this challenging time.
Wonderful, Felix. And again, welcome, Michael. Help us understand, related to what Felix shared on the impacts related to the transatlantic specifically, and maybe even other international lane challenges, how's SkyCell approached the challenge, and where are we headed from your vantage point?
Sure. I just want to reiterate something real quick that Felix was sharing about the packaging industry. You know, it's the thermal packaging manufacturers, the thermal container manufacturers, such as SkyCell, such as my friend Felix here in his organization, and others within our vertical that are really at the forefront to ensuring the successful distribution and really protecting the efficacy of these vaccines upon arrival to the destination. You know, it's a very challenging and very serious scenario that we're trying to eradicate a very devastating virus here that we're all playing a major part in. But to get back to your question, I think to really answer this question, I think we need to go back to Q3 of 2020 when a number of the panelists here were also on a panel all together. And this is before we knew anything about the vaccine manufacturing distribution. And we were all looking into our little crystal balls and trying to speculate, you know, what's this going to really look like once it starts? You know, once the manufacturers begin the distribution of the vaccines, you know, what's the trade lanes? What's the volume? Will this be a charter service? Will this move on commercial aircraft? You know, what's this really going to look like? And what is COVID going to consume in the supply chain? And I think, honestly, I don't know that we've really seen the bulk or the mass distribution quite yet. You know, from a US export scenario, I really think a lot of the manufacturers' production has stayed domestically, trying to manage the vaccine distribution here across the United States. I believe here in the US, once we start tailing off and we've successfully vaccinated those who want to get vaccinated and those who don't want to get vaccinated just simply won't, we'll see a decline in usage. I think we'll see an increase in exports of those vaccines from the US. Now, I don't think we'll see those in major trade routes necessarily. I think we'll see those like what we're seeing now in the ancillary routes, the China to Middle East, the China to Africa, some Europe to South America. And I think these we're going to see large volumes being moved around. And I think potentially if these volumes exceed commercial capacity, we're going to see manufacturers moving around to chartering these services, chartering these distribution services to these locations. So it's going to be interesting to see what the future brings. So I don't think we've really seen or captured this bulk volume. You know, back Q3 of 2020, you know, a lot of us were talking about how much this distribution is going to be. And we were talking about hundreds of 747s full of product. We were trying to wrap our brains around how much this is really going to be. And that's the guide, the judge that we were using. And I don't see we've seen that yet. But I think we may down the road. I think we may see this shift farther down the road. We may see maybe not that volume, but I think we're going to see a great increase come down the road.
Right. And I'll just add, it was excellent. We're going to need to look at things that are more looking up for, and I'm not saying solve world hunger, but more collaborative ways. I mean, you got, 300,000 plus cases a day in India now. That are new ones daily. We've got to look at this in a much larger scale. That's not as selfish, but that's just me.
And these are the destinations I speak of. The destinations that lack the resources that first world countries may have. We need to really focus and challenge the third world countries and really get the vaccinations. We have to remove this vaccine from all corners of the globe, not just our large countries and large continents. We really got to make sure that we're able to supply effective and the full efficacy of our vaccines to these locations as well, too.
Absolutely. And that's awesome, Mike. All right, now for Gary, thank you. This is a tough one for you, Gary, because I'm going to ask you to play a little bit of Murphy's Law or Murphy's Ghost, wherever you learned it, right? As we know, what might go wrong often does go wrong. Help us understand from the packaging systems perspective, from your company modality, and what are you seeing in terms of gaps, other findings in the systems and testing needs? I say systems, packaging systems that are weak, or that there's gaps in the logistics hub that needs to be improved, that you've unearthed, that you can share, right? That needs better packaging, or other words of wisdom in this critical area. Gary?
Well, thanks, Joel. Yeah, I think we've learned a lot, especially over the last 6 months, and just what the COVID vaccination program is going to look like. And I think the thing that's really crystallized for us is the need for an interdisciplinary approach. So if you try to solve this as just a packaging problem, or just as a logistics problem, or just as a formulation problem, you're gonna run into challenges, because you can't solve one of these as a point problem and not look at everything together.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's siloed, right?
Yeah, and so we call ourselves cold chain engineers, but you can't go and get a cold chain engineering degree. All of our team members are degreed engineers, but we're bringing chemical engineers, biomedical engineers, mechanical engineers, and packaging engineers all together to solve some of these problems. And I think you see it in it's like early decisions on formulation, drive temperature range requirements on stability, which drives packaging, which drives logistics. But going back to the beginning and taking a look at, well, can we do something on formulation, which allows us a wider temperature range, longer durations at different temperature ranges, which really gives flexibility on the back end from both on the packaging and logistics systems. So working with our clients from that interdisciplinary approach to come at it from a different reason, because coming up with a vaccine that can't be shipped or can't be held for actual use is kind of a little bit of a pointless exercise. And I think that's where transport simulation really came in to help, because we could test a formulation and have a very good idea of, very accurate what testing was done. So if different modes were taken a look at, or different packaging, or even a combination of both of them, we could take a look at the baseline very easily and decide if the baseline covered what the changes were going to be, or some additional testing was going to do. And when you lock yourself into more of a real world testing, where you're actually shipping it in a lane, the big challenge on that is it's very hard to understand, well, if you've got a different lane or a different routing, or you're adding a different mode, what the impact is going to be, because you really have one data point, and it's really a yes/no decision, versus being able to take a look at the different elements that go into a simulation. So being able to have those type of capabilities and look at it from an engineering perspective, from multidisciplinary approach, we were very effective working with our clients when they had to look at alternative routing. And I alluded to that a little bit. As the capacity basically dried up and other was there, governments did get involved, but when you look at the equipment that, let's say, a modern military uses versus what's available to us in a typical biopharmaceutical cold chain, much different pieces of equipment, much different vibration approaches, much different capabilities. And you have to be able to answer that question, because these vaccines are fragile, especially the newer technology, mRNA technology.
Yes.
It's a pretty significant change, and to switch modes like that, you have to be able to answer that question, because you need to ensure efficacy at the other end. Just because you can do a heavy lift like that, but if nothing's going to happen on the other end. And I think that really drove us. I don't know if you guys saw or not, I was smiling when Andrew was talking about, it sounds like he's turning into a software company, and we're turning into a software company as well. We've developed, what's really come out of this is this need for some sort of AI-driven optimization. So the ability to take a look at, near-term weather patterns, to be able to predict not only which lanes are going to be a challenge, but also to help you pick packaging and shipping modes with some sort of optimization. That's allowed us to take our interdisciplinary engineering approach and our simulation capabilities, and then run basically a bunch of what if scenarios so you can optimize it. So helping clients when they have, and everybody's been talking about it, when you have scarce resources, you're talking scarce resources for transportation, third-party logistics in some cases, the ability to store at some of these extreme temperatures, and then tie it with in the beginning at least, a very scarce resource where you couldn't lose anything in transit. Pulling that all together and being able to do some sort of an optimization routine that takes a look not only at the near-term weather conditions, but the packaging capabilities, and match those two together and start making recommendations based on what those options are, gives the best chance of success. So if there is a delay, you're taking as best advantage as you can of the capabilities that you have and what that near-term logistics problem is going to be. So it's really kind of think of it more as like a decision support system for logistics managers, that they can blend combination of packaging and logistics network capabilities to help them, navigate some of that as well. So as I said, we started out as an engineering company and we sort of finished 2020 with a pretty significant software component to what we're doing.
Thanks, Gary, and we'll come back to some of that because you have topics for future webinars, roundtables, and that you've alluded to. It's incredible when you start thinking of this, and this is where we've got, and I appreciate the audience out there have already submitted quite a few questions, but I want to allow, we're in good on time. We have 35 minutes here, but so I want to have some interaction among the speakers here. And starting with Laurent, are there any questions that you have for others?
I think, Joel, I picked up on a couple of motifs that I'd like to comment on, and then throw it back to the team here to gather feedback. So one of the aspects we didn't talk about, we've been focusing very much on the COVID-19 vaccine and therapies, and how we deliver them and how we distribute them. But we really haven't talked about or considered that that's just a small, maybe even the smallest part of the challenge when it comes to some additional goods that need to go and coexist with the COVID-19 vaccine. I think the demand for testing, if I look at now the dire situation that is happening in India, that also shows that there is a need for increasing testing capabilities and capacities. So incredible volumes go hand in hand with the vaccination efforts very often, and also maybe precede a vaccination effort, because you want to understand how is your population ready to maybe receive one or the other type of the vaccine. So those auxiliaries, may that be testing kits, reagents, etc., take up incredible volumes from the already very low capacity. So that's just something to think about as well, and all that will have a cascading effect for potential delays. The other thing, I think we all mentioned that somehow we see our organizations getting more active on the IT side, and becoming a software platforms become a very actual part of our organizations. Now, indeed, IoT, I think it's a very crucial point, and we need to make sure that we manage that data that we collect and maybe share it easier with each other. Because what I heard, each of us focus on IoT, collect data, analyze data. Now we all exist in the same ecosystem, we just take a different place in the chain of events and are responsible for them. So I would love to have a community where we can share that data that comes from the packaging, that comes from the manufacturer, and then we can overlay that data with the transportation sensors that recorded temperature, humidity, geolocation, etc. So I think that's a challenge that I would love to tackle. And I want to finish off on I think if we can provide a platform where you are easier to plug in some sorts of information technology and digest it in a single screen or a dashboard, then you're already ahead of the game. So I'm curious about the reflections on this from my fellow panelists here.
Before they talk, Laurent, you know that VSMA is volunteered to be that forum through, not through just this type of event, but through workshops and other things to really expand on this. So really appreciate you bringing it up. And guys, anyone want to step in on this question? You have to unmute. There you go.
I mean, I'll make a couple comments on it. I think that, I think in the short term, probably the innovation has to come from the shipper, from the manufacturer, and their control tower would be the place that they could assemble, because they're the only one with connections to every link in that chain, right? So you've got if you're shipping air freight, you've got at least 2 trucks involved, and you've got a plane, and you've got packaging involved, and and the list goes on. In some cases, the manufacturer is going to be the only one with a link to each one of those. So, it would seem to me that I echo the technology. I said a long time ago, when I took over running this company in 3rd generation, I left the transportation industry and got in the people business, but now it's the technology business. So I echo that, but I think that there are a lot of solutions to bring that together. I do think about, though, the lack of clarity right to the arm, right from the manufacturing to the arm. Could we, many of us have been in those FEMA facilities or otherwise getting our vaccines. And you see there's, places where trays of the vaccines are out. Wouldn't it be great if we could find how, once it's removed from the packaging, how long. So there's an infinite number, finite number of things that we can begin to track. But I do believe that, there are companies out there that are playing in this space. And I think that it's really incumbent on the shipper, the manufacturer, excuse me, to really begin to harness that from its various providers.
Totally agree.
And
anyone
probably,
else on this?
Yeah, as a shipper, yeah, that is where all that information should coalesce in one place, is onto the platform that is managed by the shipper. Because as you say, we are getting feed from a lot of various carriers, and so the issue is obviously what technology you choose, and how you manage returns, or is a one-time use, and all those type of questions have to be answered. But and as well as really the technological communication vehicle, if we could get some standardizations around that from carrier to carrier, or from device to device, that would make all of that work together much easier. But yeah, that is what customers are asking for, and what we need in order to manage our supply chains much better, to be able to to tell a customer if there has been a temperature excursion on whatever their product is, to assure that even if it looks like there may be a little less dries in there, the product is still good to go, because there hadn't been any temperature excursions, and allow us to respond should there be, to replace that or do whatever we decide to mitigate that issue as quickly as possible.
Exactly, Doug. As you were alluding to earlier, it's that it really looks simple on the surface, the Amazoning effect, as you called it, I think, but it's so difficult to have harmonized data, and not just a lot of telemetry flowing in, non-harmonized. And this is something that BSMA separately is looking at. We have a team that is supporting those kind of workshops. So I think that's great.
And I think, Joe, I just wanted to add in, and I think, yes, at the first step, the data is sort of for a specific supply chain is centered around the manufacturer. But as we started to look at the problem, there is such a big advantage to having multiple partners in the supply chain gathering that data, because we, as an industry, we tend to use the similar lanes going to similar places. And as that data starts to get collected and you get it from multiple data sources, there's a real synergy there from an optimization point of view, that you get a larger set of data, gives you a better perspective of what's going on in the lane, that lets you build a basically that decision support tool that's using from several data sources, but they're very synergistic. So one company's data can help inform a model for another company, and they don't have to see each other's data. It's just the lane model is getting better, the packaging model is getting better, the weather model is getting better. As you get more of these data points, when you turn machine learning loose on these large data sets, the larger the data set, typically the better the answer you're going to get. So I think it starts with the manufacturer, but it really has to roll up to the industry rather quickly to really take full advantage of some of the opportunity that's out there.
Yeah, I'll mention, if I can, Joel, I'll mention, for us as a broker, again, we own no trucks, yet we are providing tracking information on the trucking companies that we provide, that we utilize to our customers, to ourselves. We're folding in temperature data into that. So there are companies that's that specialize in this. We are not inventing this process. We're driving it for darn sure within our our book of business. We're driving it and pushing it and pressing it. But there are companies out there that are set up to to begin to assemble this data. So I think that the change is happening rapidly within our industry, and if you can begin to add add pieces, I think you can begin to see in the next 3-4 years or so, you can begin to see a pretty nice view coming into into the marketplace in a lot of these areas, right? But I think it's going to be incumbent, again, I believe, on the shipper, the manufacturer, to kind of make sure that they're taking care of their own supply chain. But there are so many companies out there that are beginning to integrate industry data. And I believe that as time goes on, what you're going to find is you're going to find, as what happens in technology, more of these companies will begin gobbling up each other and begin putting it together in a bigger way.
Thank you. And I did say we're going to open this up the last 20 minutes. We're right about at that time, but I have kind of a lead in on this because we kind of got off in a rabbit hole, which is okay. I mean, because there's a lot of these things that are on the surface theoretical, right? But let's get to kind of some live fire, a live fire type of example. So back to what was talked about earlier. So let's say you've not only qualified with your packaging system, a primary and secondary for your lane. Let's get to what I know shippers have lost out on, and that is they never went beyond just a primary and backup. And their result was they can't ship without jumping through hoops. Does anyone want to tackle this one on the need to go to more than just having a couple lanes, of each lane that you're shipping, a couple of, primary and secondary validated types of systems? So whoever wants to, not all at once. I know this is a tough one, but if you want to try to tackle this one just from your vantage point, if you want to, it's an open question.
I'm happy to jump in there, but I think it's also Gary who will be able to add some valuable information there. From our end, we encourage a more generic qualification rather to a worst case scenario, rather than focusing on individual lanes, because things can change. So if you kind of bundle that together, and I know the ISTA organization has done some good work in the last couple of years to come up with profiles. They might need some further, let's say, fine tuning in order to really allow apple with apple comparison, and to go what we mentioned earlier, to go towards a digital validation process rather than spending thousands of dollars on a, let's say, a traditional validation process on a lane by lane basis. But yeah, we definitely encourage going towards a worst case scenario testing in order to cover as many lanes and situations as possible and not having to go back. And once you do that, it does allow you to add new solutions easier, because then you don't have to test them on a specific lane. Now, obviously, the SOPs for that particular lane will be added, but that may be something that Gary can add to from his expertise.
Yes. Gary, would you want to comment at all?
Oh yeah. I think the industry has moved that way over the years, and I think more rapidly. I think the benefits are showing there. You know, the idea of trying to validate a single therapy in a single lane and by a single trucking company is long gone. And Felix is exactly right. The idea of doing a more of a global validation or qualification approach makes a ton of sense. And I think that's both on thermal packaging and the shipping lanes as well. When you start looking as a shipping lane, not as from a point A to point B, but start looking at a shipping lane and as more of its component parts. What are the expected inputs into that system? Vibration and shock profiles, temperature, humidity, pressure changes. When you think and you start deconstructing transportation lanes and testing in that form, it's very easy to cover a whole range of lanes, and that's both from the packaging side and on the drug product side. So when you're looking at putting together a package, giving yourself as much freedom, really says, qualify a packaging to a much more of a global profile and understand what you're qualifying it to. And then when you're taking a look at the drug product and primary packaging interface and potential impact to physical and chemical stability, taking that same approach. So if you do have to you build a lot more flexibility into your network from there. So if you're not tied to a specific lane or a specific package or even a specific routing, it gives you a lot more flexibility if you have to make changes, and to be able to look at it from a technical point of view, how those changes have been already pre-tested, and you can justify that rather quickly. Gives a lot more flexibility, not only to what packaging choices you make, but also carrier choices you're able to make as well.
I'll add a second here real quick here as well, Joel. So kind of like what Felix was saying, from our side, we're all seeing digitalization being a major player in the PQ or product qualification of particular lanes, packaging, products, so on and so forth. The waste that's going along with just qualifying a particular package, a particular product on a particular lane, when we have all this robust data that the airlines are collecting, the forwarders are collecting, the truckers are collecting, the packaging manufacturers are collecting. You have all this array of data that you can encompass and really give a visualization to that lane specific to maybe the packaging or the product, that we're really seeing technology now playing a major role in determining the qualification of product packaging and lanes, and not having to just only send that one particular package with that one particular product, that one particular lane. We can make this be more speed and efficiency by using technology and digitalization.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah, can I just add that
Sure.
yeah, I don't think that you really can be competitive and not build as much variation in your supply chain as you can. Whatever, you can't be the gating factor to enabling your supply chain to be as flexible as it can be. So if you can say we've only qualified this one lane for this one supplier for this one location, you become the barrier to managing your supply chain more efficiently, and you just can't let that happen.
Absolutely agree. Yes. So hey, now we're gonna turn this over. Dave Malenfant has received your questions. If you came in late by chance, make sure you're on mute, but via chat, send out any questions you have. But if we can't cover them today, we've got 15 minutes left or so. If we can't cover them, we're going to take the transcripts from it and see how we can address it for you.
Thanks, Joel. So one of the first questions that came up is we talked a lot about COVID-19, but what's been the impact on the cost of full truckload delivery compared to pre-COVID and post-COVID? Has there been a difference?
Yes, certainly. So the two big cost drivers for us have been labor, right? So just yesterday, I announced our second very large wage increase to our professional drivers of the year, and we're in April, so likely gonna have another one. So it's being a qualified professional truck driver right now is like being a lefty starting pitcher. You're very sought after, and it's a very intense recruiting scheme that's going on. So that's the biggest cost driver. I'm sorry?
You get a signing bonus?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I should bring it up. I should bring that up.
But what about shippers? Are they paying more now? Post-COVID versus pre-COVID?
Certainly, yeah. So price. So that's the biggest cost driver, right? Along with insurance, like we could spend a half an hour in insurance markets, right? But so as a result, those are the biggest drivers of price increases. So yes, so relative to, I would estimate, Jeff has some other macro reference points, but 20 to 30% higher than a year and a half ago, easily. And then, relative to the last topic we were discussing, right? It's a relationship. So if you're dealing with a forwarder who anticipates inbound from Asia to North America trade, and they see the problems that are arising weeks in advance, and they know their access to shipping lines capacity is going to be constrained, they might come to you with a solution to reroute via air, right? If you have a relationship. A motor carrier like us, we have, for our relationship-oriented business, we're 100%. We're committed. We don't turn down business that's allotted to us consistently on a weekly basis where we can predict it and plan for it. But if you're an ad hoc, onesie here and there, and hey, we'll come to you after we go to other people, we're going to tell you the price, right? And we're going to limit our availability because we're allocating a scarce resource. So that's the difference. Whether you're a forwarder like Laurent or you're a transporter like us, the carrier, if you're not relationship oriented, then you're going to end up like over a barrel a little bit with both recognizing revenue. Forget price. Price is not the issue. It's your ability to recognize revenue. So we hate being in that position, but yes, to kind of answer the question, I would say roughly on contract pricing, meaning consistent, predictable business, roughly 20 to 30% higher than a year and a half ago. And I wish that I could tell you that's all margin expansion. That's not the case. Most of that is just covering the cost increases.
But what is this going to do to spot pricing? I mean, contract pricing is going up 30%, but what about spot pricing?
Yes.
Is that even more exponentially increasing?
Yeah, so that's much more volatile, right? Because you can't plan for it. So that delta is much greater. And that in some cases could be 50 to 100% premium relative to a year and a half ago. But again, the costs are only going one way. And I bring for you economist types, Baumol's cost disease. So if you look, there are certain industries, right, whether it's nursing or truckload transportation, right? Costs, you can only get so efficient. So the cost associated with two people in a tractor trailer only goes up, right? When you're dealing with small package, LTL, other network, hub and spoke type of consolidation plays, yes, then the marginal cost per shipment may decline with more volume. But in truckload, that just doesn't happen. Okay. So the ways you can get efficient is, how can you set up a network to minimize downtime, that sort of stuff. But costs will continue to increase. So if you're in a position where your compensation is evaluated on the basis of lowering costs associated with logistics this year, my advice is to bring people like us in and renegotiate, because it's just
Yeah.
unfortunately not achievable.
I hear that, Andrew,
hold on.
and but what I hear from shippers are saying, we're being asked to do dry ice or do -20 storage, but we can't find the capacity. We can't find the capacity at a reasonable price
And Dave,
in order for us to do that.
and Dave, are you talking about FTL, LTL, specialty?
All of it. I mean, all of it. I mean,
start with one of them so we can talk specific.
let's not talk full truckload anymore, because most of the -20 goes. Let's talk about the last quarter mile. What is the status of that capacity to be able to do it?
Let's use an example. So we're talking about vaccine shipment to pharmacy. That's what you're talking about.
It could be vaccines, or it could be other CAR-T, others to the patient. Because when I talk to CFOs, they say it is extremely costly, and I don't want to pay those costs. So what's happening in the industry to try to make it more affordable and make the capacity greater?
Well, there are some really forward-thinking folks who are dealing with kind of clinical trial logistics, and as you guys can attest better than I, that much of that, whereas historically clinical trials were more centralized, right? Patients would come into the central location, hospital, whatever, medical center. Now, partly due to the virus, right, that's been more decentralized. So the direct-to-patient model is likely to become more prevalent. I think that'll be sustained. And there are people who, you're correct, if you're simply looking to offload that last courier piece of it on a unit basis, it's probably going to be quite expensive. But if you engage somebody to solve that whole mess of problems associated with the logistics of clinical trials, they can package that in such a fashion that the actual delivery is a de minimis portion of the overall solution. We don't do that. That sounds like a great pitch. I'm ready to get into it. But if it's one component of an overall solution, it's probably less of an issue.
Anyone else? Because I have a follow-up question to that. I mean, because from the audience is saying, this whole virtual cold chain, and trying to understand what the cold chain is all about, can help them make, lane risk assessments more dynamically, and help to find the most effective combination of packaging and transportation service with minimal temperature excursions. How do we do that? How do we work with our providers to make that happen?
Dave, I think from a risk assessment point of view, it's a commonplace, luckily. We do deal with a lot of lane risk assessments, because what we want to understand is what are the risks that we are willing to accept, make them visible, and then work to mitigate them. But ultimately, to Andrew's point before, I think capacity will always be one of the challenges that will be difficult to deal with, because even if we say in this particular lane risk assessment, we have covered temperature, we have covered availability, we have covered the right packaging, or maybe we have deployed the right packaging to try to minimize the capacity challenge, reefer truck to a regular truck, just as an example. Still, the capacity, ultimately, if that particular truck or transport solution is not available, you again have a bottleneck. So ultimately, efficiencies are certainly there, but I think we have to be ready and face reality that sometimes whatever we see on a paper or in programs, capacity, physical capacity, as Andrew and Jeff are in that space, if it's not there, it's just simply not there.
And I'll add a bit to this as well too. That the virtual risk assessment helps you to be able to pivot, right? So understanding the tolerance of the product, but then also trying to mitigate the risks. And like Laurent said, when you are substituting a piece of your supply chain that may not be there, having a digital lane risk assessment gives you the ability to pivot quickly and not having to be stuck with what that qualification shipment was, dependent on each and every milestone in your supply chain taking place. Look, in this environment, things are changing drastically and quickly, and you have to be able to be flexible and be able to pivot from one scenario to another. And I think by virtue of digitalization, it gives us the ability to run scenarios quickly and understand those outcomes, so then we can make a quick decision to pivot. You know, if X is not there, then we can move to Y, and we are still successful on that lane, and we can make sure that that shipment is delivered successfully to the destination.
So Michael, I love the fact you brought that up, because you're using digital twins to try to anticipate what the best value is. But you know, the audience wants to know, I mean, are you all doing temperature tracking from the supplier all the way to the customer? That I hear that a lot. There's a lot of concern about, you know, do you really have good temperature tracking?
Now, I will say for each individual in the supply chain, each stakeholder, they all manage this in a different way, right? So your manufacturers are putting temp tails on their packaging inside thermal packaging. Most of your thermal packaging manufacturers have sensors that are recording data as well too. Then you even have third-party individuals that are providing coverage of the environmental impact of product as well too. So you have all these various vendors that are recording data in various ways. And if you can bring that all together, just gives you a better idea of what that product, that commodity is exposed to in the supply chain. So in answer, yes, each person is collecting data of temperature in one various form or another. Unfortunately, a lot of times those aren't all brought together to assess the lane. So I think this is where it comes back to really collaborating with all the folks in the supply chain, from the manufacturers, the airlines, the forwarders, the packaging manufacturers, even the truckers as well too. Keep in mind, the truckers are recording temperature as well too. So each person is doing this on their own level with their own temperature management system. So yeah, we're all collecting it, but I think it comes down to how we're using that data and how we're making it best suitable to detect and determine the length.
You're using it from a.
Dave, hold on a second. So I just want you to take a pause on that, okay? Because there's a whole regulatory and compliance aspect of any of these, right? We can talk about it holistically to be able to execute, but then there's the submission and compliance side, which is a future topic, future area. However, I do want Gary to touch on it a little, because
yeah, but let me just not to disagree.
Finish that first, Dave.
Okay, yeah,
please go ahead, Gary.
Well, I just wanted to jump in about the virtual supply chain and risk assessments, and they're good tools, but they only get you so far.
Right.
And you know, Michael hit on, a lot of people have hit on it here. You know, data collection is fine. Monitoring is fine. It's just going to tell you at the end of the shipment if you've got a problem. So, you know, the way we've tackled the solution is being able to look in the near term. So look out 5 days and figure out what's the best way to ship based on what the capabilities you do have, which lanes make sense, which lanes don't, and start allocating those scarce resources. And it's a significant technical challenge because when you look at, just the simple, hey, I've got 600 lane pairs and 7 different boxes, and I'm trying to figure out which day I should ship over the next 5 to 7 working days. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of computations you have to take a look at if you're going to do any real type of optimization on it. So I think the first step is putting together the data set, but what you have to do then is be able to very quickly take that data and turn it into actionable information for the shippers and the carriers, because they're not all going to, or you may find out tomorrow you've lost a lane or you've lost some capability and you have to pivot on the fly.
Yes.
You have to make that decision rather quickly, and you're going to need a decision support tool to do it.
Exactly. Go ahead, Dave. And
No,
any other questions before we sum?
Let me see here. No, I think that's about, there's one about pricing, and I don't want to get into pricing. I don't think it's fair to get into pricing. But the only thing I was summarizing the pricing, and your, comment if you want. Where do you think pricing is going to go? So, spot in contract, if you want to answer that. If you don't, then fine.
I'll take a crack at that. Echoing Andrew's earlier comments, spot market pulls contract market. Spot market went wild, berserk last summer and really hasn't slowed down. That's pulled up contract rates. I don't see that changing. I saw the comment there, and that fluctuation. If you're not a regular shipper, you don't have year-long volume and predictable volume year-round. California is the most seasonal of locations. Florida might be as well. And if you don't have that kind of regular volume, you are susceptible to that kind of a swing. And those kind of swings right now, we're seeing astronomical numbers in lanes just shouldn't be. But look, that's because we've got a lot of freight moving. And I don't, again, back to my earlier comment, I think we might be 6, 7 months in, 8 months in to a 16, 18-month cycle. So figure another year, maybe into mid part of, spring, mid part of next year.
Thanks, Jeff. And time for us to do a summary. And for those that had questions that were unanswered, we're going to address them through whatever means possible to get your answers. So I certainly appreciate the participation from everyone here. And what I'd like to do is just from each of you, if you have any closing comments before we wrap up, in no apparent order.
All right, I guess I'll go. So quickly, in the US, estimates for GDP growth, 6.2%. That's massive. Inventory to sales ratio right now is about 1.3. It was 1.27 in January. That's basically the lowest in 10 years. Retail inventory to sales ratio, which is how many widgets do you have on the shelf to sell one. Retail right now is about 1.23, lowest in 30 plus years. So in other words, high growth, extremely tight inventories, that equates to massive stress associated with transportation. So just to keep that in mind, that means more lead time is required, more engagement on a relationship basis. And then, we're in this kind of super premium segment of the market in terms of massive investments required. So that just means even further lead time and further engagement on a relationship basis is required. Those are my parting words. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If I may, I'll just jump in there because I think I can follow up on there. I would base, especially because of that, I'd encourage everyone to collaborate. The earlier you guys pick us up in terms of including us in discussions, plannings, and so on and so forth, the better we are able to plan inventory and make sure the right solution is at the right place. As Andrew said, that isn't a task that maybe in the past was able to do within 2 or 3 days and at reasonable cost. And these days, this is just not the same anymore. So therefore, I think collaboration is extremely important. Sharing information and including everyone in the supply chain early on in discussions definitely helps optimizing it for everyone as well.
Great summary. Anyone else?
I'll touch on it. I can't add too much more to what what Andrew mentioned. I'll state this. talked about primary and secondary. In an environment like today, you have a primary, you know, that's your one and only go-to. That secondary is not sitting around waiting with a truck to bail you out. You're basically, after that primary is gone, you're in the spot market, and you're going to pay that premium to get that truck away from another client. So, you know, again, we and as service providers have asked for years to have a collaborative relationship. Some of us have had greater success than others in doing that, but I think that the time is here. The last 6 years are any good lesson. The time is here for us to realize collaboration is really the only thing that's going to get us through the turbulent times that we're living through.
Exactly, Joe. Great.
And Joel, if I
Anyone
just
else?
wanted to add one thing as well, and I know there's a separate regulatory track going on, but if you're a manufacturer and an innovator out there and you've been listening to this, if you aren't addressing these challenges late phase 2, early phase 3, as you're getting ready to file, and you're not bringing your carrier partners on board, your packaging partners on board to help with the risk assessment and understand this, you're really setting yourself up for some really significant challenges on commercial launch. And this is a time to do it. This is a time to bring the experts in to consider as part of your filing strategy how you're going to address some of these significant logistics challenges that are out there. And if you're waiting till, you know, ready to file or even later than that to address this, you're late. You're very late to the party. This needs to be addressed early in commercialization. It needs to be an interdisciplinary strategy that brings all the players together to really understand what this challenge is going to be, because nobody wants a product to come on the market and not be able to get it to the patients who need it. And that can be avoided, or at least mitigated, if you think about it earlier than I think anyone has been thinking about it at this point, because of all the challenges raised here today.
Yes. Anyone else? I know we have a few more, haven't some.
Quick parting note from my side. I think as we think that the marketplace will remain volatile, and the takeaway from the conversation is exactly that. And I just like to echo again that indeed that collaboration is very crucial. And also, if you have problems, then if you have problems today, keep on finding partners that are willing and able to listen and also have solutions, because exactly of the changing marketplace that exists. Thank you.
Exactly. We're
Yeah,
down to
I would give another summary here, but everybody's covered on almost all the topics. We've done a great job on this panel today. So I'll just end by saying thank you for all your guys' time. And as we said, you know, this is a very challenging time, but challenging always brings individual success. So I wish all you guys success in your endeavors.
Thanks. Doug, did you have a final?
Yeah, really enjoyed my first roundtable here. So look forward to doing it again at some point. Yeah, it is challenging times, but challenging time to bring on opportunities for invention and to go ahead and do some creative solutions that you really hadn't thought of. So, you know, take advantage of the crisis.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, audience, for your patience. I know we ran over a bit, but we will be doing an edit of this, not only transcript, but other that will be featuring. So if you miss some of it, you get this in the recorded message. We're going to be working behind the scenes to make this one that we can build on. There's several new topics, and some of what was said, I think is a good food for our fall conference that we're going to be having. So sounds good. And everyone, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And thanks again to each of you that volunteered your time to be panelists. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day, okay? Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.